The Montgomery College Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program is a unique collaboration between the Paul Peck Humanities Institute and Smithsonian's Office of Educational Technology. This unique professional development opportunity encourages community college faculty to teach with the Smithsonian. In 2022, the program hit a milestone anniversary, celebrating 25 years, 235 faculty fellows, and more than 25,000 student visits to Smithsonian museums. Dr. Dianne Cherry is a seasoned messaging professional with extensive experience in social activism, public affairs, and higher education. As an undergraduate at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, she was staff writer for the Black Ink newspaper and a contributor to the Daily Tar Heel. Upon completing her bachelor's degree with a double major in journalism and radio, television, and motion pictures at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 1976, she earned a master's degree at The Ohio State University in journalism with a concentration in public relations. Cherry became coordinator of public information at the NC Division of Environmental Management in 1980. After earning her doctorate in mass communication research at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Cherry joined the communication faculty at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. While there, she earned a fellowship to examine the uses of images and icons in the Inuit First Nations, and developed and taught the seminar Peoples of Color and Mass Media. As chair of the Department of Journalism at Norfolk State University, she served as program convention chair and chair of both the minority divisions of the Eastern Communication Association and the Association for Education and Journalism and Mass Communication. Relocating to the DMV, Dr. Cherry became a writer for the Special English section at the U.S. State Department's Voice of America, as well as public affairs specialist for the D.C. Department of Human Services.
The title of my presentation is Social Justice in the Time of the Pandemic, the Hurdles Behind the Urgency of Now and Moving Forward After COVID. And the way that this was put together, or is being put together, because as a journalist, you know, you never finish editing. And so there are lots of parts of this, but the historical part comes first. And then we talk about the urgency of now, and then we look at how our students saw the pandemic in fall of 2022 as a sometimes an opportunity. All right, so we'll go forward. So the historical context is, what exactly is social justice? How do we define that? What is it? Well, Dan knows that it has an environmental arm, and I know that it probably has an educational arm. It's social, it's society. And so that's sort of where we started as we began to talk about this project in our classes. And yes, that is plural. And a second part of the history is bridging us to currency and the future, because the second question asks, how might the Smithsonian Institution help online and in-person visitors see, think, and wonder about that thing we are calling social justice? Whether race fits at the Olympics or bended knees during a national anthem, it's clear that today's students can recognize objects and images and terms and innuendos, and patois can reveal support or condemnation or indifference to an idea, concept, or an individual. So we were talking about today's world, which is easy to do in the culture part of our textbook. And then we started talking about pieces of society like education and fiscal resources and healthcare. And we started to look back and take some ideas from our history, people's history, and see where it would be analogous, if you will, to the pandemic that we were living through. So our textbook is Essential Communication, and among the benefits of relating culture and language is to increase students' communication competence, which is really what we are here to do. And it is an increasingly digital information economy. And our goal was to help students create connections to the past and curate for themselves objects that would help them think about the future. So we were looking at symbolic, verbal, and nonverbal communication tools and techniques, and what could be a better venue for verbal and nonverbal communication tools and techniques than a museum. And so we started to look at a programmatic context, which looks at COMM 108 as a partial fulfillment of the gen ed requirement here at the college. And gratefully, there were 2 7-week classes that were challenged to prepare and deliver informative speeches about objects and exhibits held at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture, which you've heard a little bit about. Thanks, Heather. And we're moving on. As I said, yes, that is classes, plural. My first face-to-face 7-week section began in August, and the second began in September. We talked about how COVID really demonstrated and illustrated the disparities in lots of ways. Of course, if students, really younger students, were sent home from school and told to use computer-aided internet sources for their education, and they didn't have a computer or internet resources, then that could be a problem. And we saw that across the country. From their own examples, students began to differentiate between what one student said and what somebody else said, but that's not really what I'm talking about. But yes, it is justice. And so then it was time to distinguish between at least 4 kinds of social justice. And they are presented here for you. I'm not going to read that because I know you can read, but they are distributive, retributive, procedural, and restorative. Now, the experiential context is that we used the field trip, either internet-based field trip or a person foot traffic-based field trip, to conduct the I Think, I Wonder activity for at least 3 of the artifacts that they would see. And if you've been there and if you've seen the picture that Heather just showed, then you know that the museum is huge. And so I suggested that we start, yes, Heather, at Reckoning, and go through and ask that the students go through the exhibit and complete the I Think, I Wonder worksheets for 3 activities. And we're going to see in just a moment how they responded to that challenge. So yes, there were 2 visits. One was virtual on September 28th, for which we did not need field trip permission slips, and one on November 16th, with was in person, for which we did. And getting those back was part of the challenge of this fellowship. Let me just say that. We've been through this. In class, we looked, for both classes, we looked at the lunch counter from Greensboro as a place to start, and then we tried to talk about what kind of justice was it when people would go and sit and break the law to have a sandwich. And while that may not be the case today, we know that there are instances where sometimes you may need to take justice as a method of recourse, I suppose. Let's say that. Okay, and we're going to talk about some of their reports in just a moment. I want to see some of those. And as I said, this was for the required informative speech that each COMM 108 student has to complete. Okay, so we're about to go into another mode. This is walking into the museum. The Live Oaks is thematic. And I'm not going to leave this up here long enough for you to read it because you probably can't read it, but please go down to the museum and take a look. This is from 20114, which was the second class. You'll see one of my students, Yesley Tricios, said that the image of the Black Lives Matter march and t-shirt held in Ferguson is something I would say that caught my attention rather than my impression, because this is still an ongoing problem in today's time. The object is contemporary. And so if we look at hurdles of the past, urgency of now, and the future, I think she captured that quite well in her reflection. Her second piece was Race is Not a Crime poster, and it made her think about social justice because everyone should be considered equal. The color of your skin should not matter or determine what rights you have. Being darker or lighter should not be a crime or allow someone to racially profile you. Another one of the curated items is the I Can't Breathe t-shirt, which of course regards the death of George Floyd, a victim who died at the hands of a former police officer, our own system that failed him. This makes me think of social justice because, for one, he was a chance of all, I don't know what that says, he couldn't breathe, okay, because he had a knee on his neck. Police have been killing Black folks for an exceptionally long time now, which is why they should enforce more protective rights for people of color. And we were talking about it later, and I asked her about the influence of technology and the fact that there were cell phones at that event. And she had some really exciting things to say about that. Okay, and she also says, I wonder about the anger they must feel, but also the motivation they feel to strive for better justice toward the Black community. It is amazing to me how we've had Black leaders such as Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., etc., who voiced their opinion just like this problem we have today. And it causes me to believe that the same people who created these objects at the museum might have felt the same courage these Black leaders felt as well. They're all fighting for the same rights. Now, Kylie selected the money box from Bishop Richard Allen. If you're not aware, he was an early leader in African-American communities and was one of the founders of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And they hold the money box in the Smithsonian. And she wondered how money would be distributed evenly back then and how hard it must have been to create organizations at a time without modern technology to spread the message. I'm running out of time. So we also have Harriet Tubman Shaw, and I wonder more about the life of Harriet Tubman. I also wonder about how she felt through her life and if she ever thought that she would become a powerful icon in this time. Okay, let's go to, all right. Now, Muhammad is a student from this 20114 CRN who picked 2 items, and they are Transmitting the picture to the masses was an important tool in informing people about the problems African Americans were facing, in this case, police and police brutality. So this takes in the technology piece, which is certainly part of the digital information future that our students will be living through. Not us, not so much, but definitely them. The Rodney King beating was one of the first raw videos of a public beating that was shown all over the media. People were able to see firsthand the atrocities committed against a helpless Black male. And, in the last month or so, we've seen something worse. The second pictures tell me how far we did come with media and transmitting pictures of resistance and fight against police brutality and the slaying of Michael Brown. And we won't even talk about this because we've already talked about this. Thank you, Heather. But this was one of Muhammad's statements. As for the Ferguson marches for Michael Brown, the picture shows me the strength and resilience of the couple in the front of the picture. Hand in hand, they marched while a group of protesters surrounding them chanting. This also brought to mind how far we've come in being able to see actions and reactions firsthand with the advancement of technology and how fast news travels these days. And that is the 20114 class. And there's me waiting on students to show up.